The first thing I heard was my own name, spoken with a kind of careful restraint that told me the room had already made up its mind. Irene. CEO Samuel Reeves said, "Is this yours?" He slid a single sheet of paper across the conference table. I recognized the formatting before I even recognized the signature. A resignation letter. My resignation letter. I stared at the bottom of the page, at the curve of the first initial, the slow sweep of the last name. It looked like something I would have written on a calm afternoon with a steady hand. Except, I had never written it. Not a line of it. My throat tightened. "This is not mine," I said. But the words felt thin, like they were struggling to cross the space between me and the dozen executives watching from their seats. A board member cleared her throat. Our system logged the submission at 10:43 in the evening through the employee portal. "That is your account, correct?" "It is." I answered, but I was not anywhere near a computer. I was at my sister's birthday dinner on Capitol Hill. My phone was in my coat pocket the entire time. My voice sounded steady, but my hands on the table were cold. Samuel didn't look angry. He looked puzzled, and that scared me more. Irene. This letter moved through 3 internal approvals before it reached my desk. Someone submitted it with your credentials. Another executive leaned forward. "Do you deny sending it?" I pushed the paper gently back toward them. "I deny writing any part of it." Silence followed, heavy and suffocating. It spread through the room like a slow fog. Chairs creaked softly as heads turned, one by one, toward the man sitting 2 seats down from me. Douglas Hale, my manager of 4 years, was already pale. His jaw tightened, and he stared straight ahead as if refusing to acknowledge anyone in the room. His fingers twitched against the folder in front of him. No one said his name. They did not have to. The tension had already shifted, settling squarely on his shoulders while I tried to hold myself steady in my chair. I kept my eyes on the letter, the forged lines, the signature that mimicked my own. I did not know how it had entered the system or how many people had touched it on its way to this table. I only knew one thing as I drew a slow breath and waited for someone to speak again. Someone wanted me out, and they had begun with my name. 48 hours before that boardroom, my life still felt manageable. I walked into Northlake Financial with a stack of audit prep notes under my arm and a throat sore from too many late nights. The upcoming operations audit was the kind of pressure that either crushed people or pushed them upward. For me, it was supposed to be the final step toward the Director of Operations role. "Morning, Irene," called Mark from accounting. His smile faltered halfway. "You, heading to your office." "Where else would I be heading?" I said, trying to read his expression. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, then shook his head. "Never mind. Big week. Bigger than usual." I answered. As I turned the corner toward my team's row, I caught sight of the intern I mentor, Lily, quickly minimizing a screen. Her shoulders jerked like she had been startled. "Everything all right?" I asked. Yes. Just finishing a task Douglas gave me?" She wouldn't meet my eyes. I frowned. "Since when is he assigning you tasks directly?" She swallowed. "He said you were busy. That was not a word people used for me unless something was wrong. My inbox was already full of messages flagged urgent. Before I could open any, a notification popped up. Access denied, shared drive. Operations, Q4. The same drive I managed every day. I tried again. Same result. "Hey, IT made changes overnight," said Jonas from the next desk. "Maybe your permissions reset." "My permissions never reset," I said quietly. He shifted uncomfortably. "Talk to HR. They might know." HR about a shared drive issue when I reached the hallway outside their office. The HR coordinator glanced up and immediately looked down again as if eye contact might burn her. "Irene. Hi. Sorry, can't talk right now meeting." She rushed past me without waiting for a response. I stood alone in the hallway, clutching my audit notes, listening to the building hum around me. Something in the air felt misaligned, like people were choosing their words too carefully, stepping around me instead of with me. I walked back to my office trying to steady my breath, but the thought stayed lodged in my mind. Why was everyone suddenly acting like I had one foot out the door by mid-morning? I had finally carved out a moment to breathe. I opened my inbox, expecting another wave of audit questions. Instead, the top message made my stomach drop. Your resignation has been received. Please contact HR for next steps. I stared at the words so long my screen dimmed. When I clicked it open, the timestamp read 10:43 in the evening. At that exact time, I had been curled under a blanket on my sister's couch, half asleep after too much cake and too much family noise. My phone had been charging across the room. I whispered, "No, absolutely not." My fingers shook as I logged into the employee portal. A new document sat under my name, a resignation letter. I opened it, and the first sentence punched through me. I am stepping down for personal reasons. That was not my voice. I did not use phrases like that. The tone was soft, almost grateful, like someone trying to leave quietly. Someone had written a version of me that did not exist. I marched straight to HR. The door was open. The coordinator, Julia, was at her desk. "I need to talk to you," I said. She flinched. "Irene, hi." I saw the submission. The system just processed what came through. "I did not submit anything," I said. Julia's eyes darted toward the hallway. "Well, once a document is attached to your profile, it routes automatically. That is how the workflow is designed." "Julia," I said softly, "you know me. Do you really think I would resign out of nowhere?" She swallowed hard. "I am not supposed to comment." "You should. You should probably talk to your manager." The warning was too quiet to be casual. She gathered her papers as if she might flee. I stepped back, gripping the doorknob, feeling heat rise in my chest. A forged letter, a fake timestamp, a system that treated lies as facts the moment they were uploaded. Someone had crawled into my professional identity and rewritten it. Someone had touched my account, and they were willing to go dangerously far to erase me. I did not bother knocking. I stepped into Douglas Hale's office and closed the door behind me. He looked up from his monitor with a smile that stretched too wide, too practiced. "Irene," he said, tone bright enough to sting. "I heard you've had a busy morning. I need to talk to you," I replied. "Now." He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands like he was about to coach me through a minor misunderstanding. "If you're reconsidering your resignation, you should communicate clearly. These transitions go smoother when everyone is aligned." I stared at him. I never resigned. A flicker so fast it almost slipped by crossed his face. He recovered immediately, but the damage was done. "Of course," he said lightly. "Maybe the letter was phrased more formally than you intended. The part about stepping down for personal reasons." My pulse thudded. "You read the letter." He hesitated. "HR briefed me." "No," I said. "HR did not show me the letter until I found it myself." "They did not brief you on the phrasing." His jaw tightened. His eyes dropped to a stack of files. "Anywhere but me." "Irene, let us not turn this into a spectacle. If you changed your mind overnight, just say so." I was not anywhere near a keyboard at 10:43 in the evening. I said, "Someone accessed my profile and submitted that document." He reached for a pen, but his hand shook. "You have always been emotional during audit seasons. Maybe you forgot." "Did you access my account?" I asked. The pen clattered slightly against the desk. "Irene," he said quietly, "I do not appreciate accusations, especially ones based on assumptions." "Answer me." He stood abruptly, smoothing his shirt as if the motion might control the tremor in his voice. "Let us not make this dramatic. You know how these things get. No apology, no denial, no attempt to hide the fear tightening his posture. Something inside me shifted, a clean break I could almost hear. Douglas was not confused, he was frightened, and I needed to understand what he was so terrified of me discovering. I left Douglas's office with the kind of numbness that sharpens every sound. By the time I reached my desk, I already knew I could not wait for anyone else to fix this. I opened my messages, pulled up the photos from my sister's birthday dinner, and saved every timestamp. Then I downloaded my phone's geolocation history, capturing the record that showed I had not left her house once after 9 in the evening. I whispered to myself, "You are going to prove this." My next stop was the compliance wing. I stepped inside and spotted Natalie Park, the analyst I had helped last quarter when she nearly lost an entire vendor reconciliation file. She looked up, surprised. "Irene, you okay?" "No," I said, "but I think you can help me." She closed her laptop slowly. "Tell me what you need." I explained everything quietly, carefully. Her expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened around her pen. "Show me the document," she said. We stood shoulder to shoulder at her workstation. I pulled up the resignation letter from the portal. Natalie downloaded the file, opened the metadata panel, and inhaled sharply. "This was created on a Northlake device," she said. "Which one?" She scrolled deeper. "Machine ID Hale D Office. That is Douglas's workstation." My pulse thudded once, hard. Natalie clicked again, accessing the user activity logs. "There is more. Your profile was accessed at 10:43 in the evening, not from an external device, from an internal admin gateway. Someone routed through the company network to mimic your login." I felt my throat tighten. "So it was deliberate, very deliberate," she said. "And whoever did it knew exactly which permissions to exploit." I gathered the printed logs she handed me, each page shaking slightly in my grip. Douglas had not just lied. He had built a trap and pushed me toward it with a forged signature and a false timestamp. Natalie lowered her voice. "Irene, he needed you gone. Before the audit hits." I held the stack of evidence to my chest, the weight of it settling in my hands. If he forged my resignation, what else was he hiding that was worth risking everything for? Natalie had not moved from her chair. Her eyes stayed fixed on the screen, her fingers flicking through file directories with a speed that told me she was looking for something specific, something she had not mentioned yet. "Irene," she said quietly, "there is another document." My voice tightened. Another resignation. "No." She clicked a folder and opened a second PDF. "This is different." The moment the text appeared, my stomach lurched. The letter was longer, colder, written in a tone meant to sound clinical. Concerns regarding emotional instability. It said, multiple incidents of verbal hostility. It accused me of threatening coworkers, undermining leadership, and creating a volatile environment. I felt heat rush to my face. "This is insane. I know," Natalie said, her voice steady but shaken. "This was built to terminate you for cause." I gripped the back of her chair to keep my balance. Why would he make 2 letters? She clicked deeper into the metadata. This one was created 1 hour before the clean resignation. It was saved, but never submitted. My hands went cold. So he had a backup plan. A much harsher one, she murmured. If the quiet exit did not work, he was ready to destroy you publicly. This version would permanently damage your career. I stared at the accusations on the screen, each line a deliberate attempt to rewrite my character. Someone had not just forged a resignation, they had crafted a narrative to erase everything I had built over more than a decade. Natalie turned to me. He intended to end your reputation, not just your job. I pressed my fingers to my temples, trying to steady the sickening churn in my stomach. 1 forged letter was a betrayal. 2 was a strategy. Someone had mapped out multiple versions of my disappearance. Why were they preparing not one, but two different exits for me? I had barely left the compliance wing when my phone rang. The caller ID froze me mid-step. Samuel Reeves, Irene. He said the moment I answered, his voice controlled and clipped. We need to talk about your resignation. Now. I did not resign. I said. There was a pause. Come to the 32nd floor. HR will escort you. The line went dead. Two members of HR were already waiting near the elevators when I stepped out. They did not speak. One gestured for me to follow. I could hear the low murmur of conversations around us, soft, urgent, disappearing the second I looked up. Phones lowered. Eyes shifted away. Every step felt like walking through a story already written about me. As we approached the executive hallway, the air tightened. Douglas Hale stood near the conference room door, a stack of papers clutched to his chest. Sweat dampened the collar of his shirt. When our eyes met, he flinched and looked at the floor. Douglas, I said quietly. He swallowed hard. Irene, this is not the place. I know, I replied. But you put me here. His face pinched as if the words had struck him physically. One of the HR reps opened the conference room door. They are ready for you. Inside, a long table stretched between a line of executives, people whose names I knew from announcements and quarterly reports but had never spoken to directly. Samuel Reeves sat at the center, hands folded, expression unreadable. Irene, he said, have a seat. I stepped inside, feeling the weight of every pair of eyes in the room. My fingers tightened around the folder holding the evidence Natalie and I had gathered. Douglas slipped in behind me, hovering near the wall, pale enough to blend into it. I exhaled once, steadying my voice before speaking. Would my truth be enough against a manager who had already rewritten my story once Samuel Reeves rested his fingertips on the resignation letter before sliding it toward me? Irene, he said, is this yours? My voice stayed steady. This is not my signature. The room shifted. Chairs rustled. A few executives exchanged glances. I opened my folder and placed the printed logs in front of me. I would like to show you when I was supposedly typing this letter. I said, at 10:43 in the evening, I was at my sister's house. I have photos, timestamps, and a complete geolocation record from my phone. A board member leaned forward. Then how did it go through your account? That is what I wondered. I said, so I asked compliance for help. Samuel looked at the assistant by the door. Bring her in. Natalie entered quietly, holding her tablet like a shield. I reviewed the document metadata, she said. The resignation letter was created on a device registered to Douglas Hale's office workstation. A murmur rippled across the table. Douglas straightened, voice cracking. Hold on. She hinted she was leaving. She told me verbally. I turned to him. I never said anything like that. He lifted his chin. Well, she is making this dramatic. Natalie tapped her screen. That is not all. Her account was accessed through an internal admin gateway. Someone used elevated permissions to mimic her login. I slid a second paper across the table. This is another document we found. One I never saw. Samuel picked it up, scanning the accusations about instability and hostility. His eyes hardened. Douglas, explain this. Douglas's lips parted, but nothing came out. His knuckles whitened against the table. I never submitted that one. But you wrote it. I said. A board member whispered, horrified. This was not a mistake. This was an attack. The room went silent, thick with the realization of how far he had gone. Everything he had built was collapsing in the span of a few breaths. I looked down at the two forged versions of my supposed exit, the fake signatures, the false narratives. What punishment fits a betrayal that nearly cost me my entire life? The investigation began before the meeting even ended. Samuel Reeves excused himself for barely a minute, returned with two members of internal integrity, and gave a quiet directive that changed everything. Douglas Hale is suspended effective immediately. Secure his access. Douglas's face drained of what little color remained. Samuel, you cannot be serious. This is blown out of proportion. Samuel did not raise his voice. You forged official documents. You accessed an employee's account without authorization. There will be no debate. Security arrived before Douglas could gather his papers. He tried to push past them, but one officer gently blocked his path. Sir, we need your badge. I built this department, Douglas whispered, voice cracking. I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. By noon the next day, Northlake Financial released a company-wide statement. It did not use my name, but everyone understood who the unnamed employee was and what Douglas had done. The message referenced fabricated documentation, malicious misuse of administrative access, and intentional harm to staff reputation. It was the most transparent communication I had ever seen the company send. People began avoiding Douglas's old office as though something toxic were leaking from it. Those who had once praised him moved quickly to distance themselves. Around mid-afternoon, I watched from my doorway as security escorted him out of the building. His shoulders were slumped, his hands empty. Someone whispered his name, and he flinched as though struck. He looked at me only once, a flicker of something between anger and disbelief passing through his eyes. Then he was gone, swallowed by the elevator. An hour later, Samuel appeared outside my office. The board would like to offer you the director of operations position, he said. You earned it long before this incident. I didn't answer immediately. My hands rested on the folder still holding the evidence I had fought to uncover. A promotion meant power, but not the kind that repaired the truth he had tried to destroy. I will think about it, I said. Samuel nodded. Take your time. When he left, I looked at the empty space in the hallway where Douglas had stood just hours before. Now that he was gone, what did I want for myself? I sat at my kitchen table long after the sun had dropped behind the skyline. The apartment was quiet in a way that made every memory louder. The late nights on audit weeks, the weekend calls, the times I had told myself that loyalty would eventually be seen, eventually be rewarded. I thought about the trust I had placed in Douglas Hale, how I had defended him to people who doubted his leadership, how I had believed he wanted me to succeed. I opened my laptop and pulled up a blank document. No template, no polite phrases written by someone else. I typed slowly, choosing every word with the same care I had used on every project for more than a decade. It was not angry. It was not dramatic. It was simply the truth. When I finished, I printed the page and signed my own name, my real signature, the one that felt steady in my hand, the one no one else could forge. The next morning, I walked into Samuel Reeves's office and placed the letter on his desk. He read the first lines, then looked up sharply. Irene, he said, you do not have to do this. You are valued here. You have every opportunity ahead of you. I know, I said. But staying would mean rebuilding something I no longer recognize. He leaned back, disappointment softening his expression. If you ever reconsider, my door is open. Thank you, I said. Truly. I walked out of his office without hesitation, past the glass walls, past the floor where everything had nearly come undone. No one escorted me. No whispers followed. It felt like stepping out of a story someone else had tried to write for me. That evening, an email arrived from a rival firm. They had read the investigation statement. They wanted to talk. I closed the laptop and stepped outside into the drizzle, letting the rain settle against my skin, breathing in the first moment that truly belonged to me.